Everyone, welcome to the Way Champions podcast this week. It's John O'Sullivan, and I'm so excited to be with Frank Busch this week. Now, before I get started with Frank, just two quick reminders. Number one, we just released our new book, The Champion Sports Parent. It's doing great. So if you are a coach and you want to give your athletes, parents something to focus on so that they can better support the work that you're doing, this is the book. Jerry and I wrote this book for you. And especially if you're working on like the Champion Teammate book and you're working through those chapters, this is a great thing to offer to parents and say, hey, you can work through this as well so that you can be the best supporter of your child's inner game and their outer game and have the best relationship with them as well. So you can grab it on Amazon right now. It was the top new release in children's sports coaching. So please go out there, grab it. It's called The Champion Sports Parent: Practical Wisdom for Raising Confident, Competitive, and Mentally Tough Athletes. Number two, we're so excited to announce that we've actually already sold out our 2025 certification and mastermind program. We had been telling you all about that, but we do have a wait list going, and we also have a list going of people who might be interested in a future one and couldn't make it in June of 2025. So if you're interested in that, you can just email me, John, John, at changethegameproject.com, and we'll put you on that list for our next cohort. But this cohort of 25 is full, which we are absolutely thrilled about. But all that information is on Change the Game Project website as well. Okay. Okay. Enough for announcements. Frank Busch. I met Frank in the fall of 2024 here. We were speaking at the same event in Mexico City together. And we got picked up from the airport and basically spent a couple days together. And what an amazing guy. So Frank is a six-time NCAA Coach of the Year, 11-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year, two-time NCAA team champion. His swimmers won over 80 individual and relay national championships while he was at the University of Arizona. American Swim Coach Hall of Famer, and then also an assistant coach for USA Swimming at the 2004 and 2008 Olympics, and then the national team director for USA Swimming at the 2012 and 2016 Olympics when they won a combined 64 medals. Absolutely best performance ever. So, Frank is just a great guy, a super experienced coach, and we had so many conversations about values, about coaching, about what we look at it for athletes, about the importance of team in an individual sport like swimming. And we had so many good conversations over breakfasts and dinners that I wanted to be able to share it with all of you. So, without further ado, get ready, get set. It's Frank Busch. Enjoy, everybody. Frank, welcome to the Way of Champions podcast. It's an honor to have you on.
John, it's great to see you again, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we had so many great conversations down when I met you at the Nelson Vargas event in Mexico City. We shared a cab or a pickup ride from the airport to um, dinner every night and breakfast every morning. And I went to your talks and you went to mine, and so much great conversation. I'm like, I gotta get him on the podcast. So it's awesome. And then you had actually coached in college, some friends of mine here from Bend. So it's a small world as well.
It is a small world, and athletics is even smaller.
Yeah, for sure. Um, what a journey you had. I mean, as I was getting ready for the podcast, um, we'll talk about your college and the Olympic experience, but I just liked how your start was that your dad was in construction and he decided to build a giant pool.
I don't know if your listeners will be entertained by all that, but it certainly is true. And uh, the pool that was built had nothing to do with any type of regulation size. It was a builder's mentality. Let's do 125 feet this way. Let's go 50 feet that way, and we'll have the biggest pool in the area.
But that became the foundation of a swimming club and all that. And I heard, and you started coaching when you were pretty young, didn't you?
Not necessarily by choice. It
Yeah.
was one of those things where I was part of a team. I was 16 years old. The coach who had coached this summer league team the year before was expected to come back and committed to come back. Graduated from college probably a week or two before that, was offered, quote unquote, a real job. And so the parents came to me and said, do you think you could babysit until we find someone new? And I said, absolutely. How, as a 16-year-old, you don't turn down adults' wishes. So that started the career. And 8 summers later, there I was.
There you were. I laughed because someone wrote an article and they said every time you went back to Kentucky there, they would have a party and they were all stunned how many people would show up to have a party with a guy who paid them $2 an hour.
Well, $2, $2 an
Those,
hour back then was big wage.
those are big wages for coaches for sure. Awesome. So, you went on and you were a collegiate swimmer and water polo player, but did you always know that like you wanted to get into coaching? Did that early start give you the bug, or was it something that you fell into?
Sort of a combination of both. You do something for a while, and each summer I did it. Fell more and more in love with the idea and doing it. And then, but I got married right before my senior year of college, and so went back to my roots and coached that summer. Finished that, and then I was approached by some parents to begin a year-round club. And I knew that that's really what I wanted to do,
Hmm.
but they weren't in a position to pay me enough money in order for to exist. So I continued with construction. And so a typical day for me as I did that for the next 4 years was get up early in the morning, have practice from 6 a.m. until 7:30, jump on a piece of equipment. At that time, it was a bulldozer. Did that from 7:30 until 3:30. Jumped off of that, came back to the pool deck and coached from 4 until 7. And I
Hmm.
did that 5 days a week. And then on Saturday mornings, I would coach exclusively.
Yeah. What I mean, I've met coaches like you have this amazing legacy. One of my great mentors was a guy named Jerry Yeagley at Indiana University in soccer. And, he started the program there and he won multiple national championships. But in the beginning, he was the one painting the fields and making it work, and do that. And you sort of have that same beginning. Um, who was who was your coaching role model? Who taught you how to coach, or did you just sort of figure it out on the fly? Or did you have a great coach? You're like, oh yeah, there we go.
I didn't, um, because I was so young and coaching summer league, the pressure that you the pressure that you feel really comes from the drive to want to succeed. So it comes from within. And the coaches that I had the opportunity to swim under all had some type of influence on my thoughts and my style. And so I would say to a young coach out there, you obviously want to be a sponge and absorb as much as you can. And if you do have a passion for it, but you can't afford it, then you do whatever it takes for you to pursue it. So, for instance, in my case, it was construction to pursue my passion of coaching. Uh,
Hmm.
I had to be able to exist. I know young coaches that have been bartenders and or
I'll,
waiters
I'll
or
I'll raise
whatever.
my my hand to that one in my first year as an assistant college coach, wanting to pursue that. I won't tell anyone what my tax return said, but it was definitely below the poverty line. I think I
Sure.
made more money collecting mileage on recruiting trips on my car than anything else. But I
Yeah.
waited tables so I could live in a basement of some house with no windows. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, John, you understand it. And so you pay attention to anyone and everyone, And what I used to do was I would watch the best athletes warm up at competitions, and I would watch the coaches handle them, and I would gravitate toward those that I felt like fit my personality or what I needed to change in order to be better at my craft.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Early on, I mean, I'm thinking of a 16-year-old, coaching summer. Was coaching to you just, hey, here's the program, here's how many yards you're going to swim today. Here's the intervals. Go for it. I mean, because you and I spent obviously so much time talking about the human side of coaching. I think most coaches initially, it's just what's the magic practice or what's the magic training program? At what point did you start shifting into if I can connect with these human beings, then I can get more out of the swimmer?
I think I learned that early on because if you look at the very basic part of a summer league program, the strength or the weakness is that in the numbers that you can, number one, get to join the team, and number two, teach them at a young age what to do. So for me, it was if we're going to be successful, excuse me, and I'm going to do this, we need to have a good lesson program.
Hmm.
So we began to try and get as many young people involved in the lesson program as possible. And I really wasn't thinking long term. Excuse me. I really wasn't thinking long term, John. I was just kind of moment to moment, year to year, because I didn't know if I was going to continue to be the coach year after year. But at least I knew that being making a connection with all the kids on the team, being only 16 years old, that was critical. And they loved doing it. So my job was to make sure it was fun and to teach them something along the way. And so as a 16-year-old, you don't even know what you're teaching. You're trying to do it, you're trying to do it in a way in which you can see progress. So sort of feeling around, I always say coaching is kind of feeling around in a dark room looking for the light switch for every individual that you coach. And if you can find that light switch with each person, all of a sudden things change.
I like that. I had a friend of mine, you call it the light switch. He said he felt like everyone has like a fire burning within them somewhere, and your job is to sort of, blow on it and fan it and get it going, right? Some people you walk in and it's already roaring and you're just throwing some more wood on it, but some you really have to nurture that little spark into a small flame and get it going. And so you have the light switch thing as well. It's like it's in there. And I think that's one of the issues I sometimes see with coaching is we there was this great quote. I think as Horst Wien was a soccer guy, and he said we look at children as empty vessels needing to be filled, right? Instead of full human beings. It's already in there. We just need to bring it out. And it sounds like that's kind of the philosophy you took from a really young age.
I think maybe I was intimidated. I'm not sure as a 16-year-old. I remember dealing with parents at that age, but the parent situation back then is very different than today's.
Hmm.
But even back then, you had to justify, excuse me, you had to justify why someone was going to be on a relay as opposed to someone not. And parents are the same nowadays that they were back then, and that they would expect their kid to have the chance to be on something, and you had to justify as a young person why they weren't.
Hmm.
Fortunately, in my case, swimming is a very objective sport. If you put two people in a race, first hand on the wall wins, or the best time is the best time. And so that's a little different than subjective when you get involved in coaches making decisions based on what they think is right.
Hmm. But I talk to coaches today, right? And again, if we fast forward to today, even in these more objective sports like a swimming or track and field, where they're still dealing with parents who say, well, they're wrong, even when they point at the time and say, like no, look at your kid's time versus this kid's time. That's why you're not on the relay, or that's why you're not running in this race. And that's, I think, how sad how far sports has gone. I just actually last night on the news, and the local news, is a little town by me, and their entire park board resigned, and they fired all their Parks and Rec staff because of parent behavior. Right? They just said, we're done. We're tired of being harassed. We're trying to run a 7-year-old soccer program. And it's just crazy, right? I mean, it's just nuts.
I think I think what should have been done then is that I think some parameters should have been set up from the very beginning,
Hmm.
communicating with the parents, letting them know that what behavior is acceptable and what's not. And if the parents have the strength to be able to vote to vote all of the coaches, staff out of the positions that they're in, well, so be it. The
So,
coaches can do that.
yeah,
But if that's not the case, and the people that lead the Parks and Rec and the staff that follow that leadership, if there's some sort of outline as to what's acceptable and what's not, then I think they would have the power to say, all right, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, this your activity, your actions are not acceptable. If this continues, you won't be allowed to attend any of the competitions, and or we're not your son or your daughter are going to be the ones that suffer because they won't be allowed to engage in being part of this team. And I
yeah,
think that that's the communication factor. Is it can be very intimidating, obviously, with parents, but I think when their groundwork is laid, when the ground rules are laid, then at least you have something that you can fall back on. Now, I realize you can watch the news and you can watch a crazy parent chase a referee across the field at the end of a match. I mean, we've seen all sorts of things that we never thought we'd ever see.
hmm,
But I do believe that if things are communicated and rules are laid down, at least that gives everybody a chance to fall back on this is the way it's done. You've been notified. We've all communicated on this. This is what you need to do.
yeah. And I think that is phenomenal advice. That you have to sort of say, this is the standard. And you don't have a right to be here. It's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to sign your kid up for this program. It's a privilege to play on the high school team or whatever it is. It's no one's God-given right. And if you, as the parent, like, I think the worst thing as a coach or as someone who runs a program, as you know, is to punish the kid for the actions of their parents. But at some point, right, like for the greater good, you have to do that, right? You have to say, sorry, it's just not a good fit for you anymore because your behavior is affecting 10, 20, 50 other kids and families. And usually when you do that, most people say thank you, right? They're like, thank you for that. Like, they're not upset that that family was removed. They're grateful because it makes the pool deck or the soccer sideline a toxic place to be. And so you set the standard, you educate as much as possible, but then you have to call the standard what you can't ignore it, right? And so I think the biggest problem I see in for many sports clubs is they have this code of conduct for parents that people check a box when they register their kid. No one reads it, but then it's not worth the piece of paper it's printed on because no one upholds it either. But the organizations that make the hard decisions and say, no, we are going to, hold you accountable for this because we're losing all our referees or we can't get anyone to coach. Those ones actually do pretty well.
At least they have something to fall back on. And I want to emphasize the importance of the communication factor that coaches, young coaches, a lot of them, but just coaches in general need to have the meeting with the parents,
Hmm.
go over those codes of conduct,
Yeah.
ask the parents what their thoughts are about that, and get it all out in the open before the season starts, because that way it's something that it's a reference point. You you folks were there. You know what we're doing. You know what we're trying to do. You know that the lessons that we're trying to teach the kids. We are going to try and involve everyone. This is not life or death. We're not chasing the W necessarily here. We're chasing the experience. And I think for young kids, as you brought up in Mexico, the winning was number 48 on the list of
Hmm.
priorities for young kids when they join teams. And when you throw that up to the parents and let them know that winning is number 48 out of a potential 80 or whatever it was, responses, I think that resonates a little bit. Now, with some, probably not, but that's okay in that at least you have something to fall back on and let them know that we discussed this. We had this
Hmm.
meeting about this. This is about the kids. It's not about you. It's not about the future. It's about the opportunity and the enjoyment, the fun of the experience.
Yeah, yeah. And statistically, there's always going to be outliers, right? Who, no matter what you say or do, won't get it. And again, that's where you just have to have the courage and the values of this is what our organization stands for, and you are not meeting that standard. So by all means, go play someone else. Go play somewhere else. So that's important. Um, Shifting to sort of teams. You had incredible success at University of Arizona with championships and over 80 individual and relay, championships and things like that. What did it feel like? Like, what was the University of Arizona? What were the values that they had to work within to be part of that program?
I was very fortunate. I worked for athletic directors that gave me and probably all the other coaches a lot of autonomy.
Mm,
And knowing that sports are the front porch of universities, whether or not I'm sure academia would love to argue that point, but we know that sports have reached a place in our society where they are the broadcasting of accomplishment.
yeah.
And so for me, it was following what I thought was good leadership and good communication within the athletic department.
Hmm.
And so I developed my own thoughts on what were most important for the very basics, the very foundation of success as individuals. And success as individuals usually means success as a team.
Hmm.
So, for instance, at Arizona, we had four principles, four pillars that I thought were the most important thing. It was show up, pay attention, tell the truth, honor your team with your effort.
Mm.
Very, very simple. Show up, pay attention, tell the truth, honor your team with your effort. Now,
Can we dive into those a little bit more? Like, because I think
absolutely.
they're important. So go, what does show up mean?
Well, that means you obviously you come to practice, and that
Hmm.
was never an issue at Arizona. I was very fortunate to be around very motivated athletes.
Hmm.
So that was just in there to make sure that everyone knew that in order to be good, this is what we had to do. Pay attention when you think about what makes you better as an athlete is when you pay attention to what we're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to accomplish as an individual, and what we're trying to accomplish as a team. So,
Hmm.
for instance, in our sport, in practice, you can talk about certain things, but once you get into the water and you're not stimulated by anything visually or really from an audio standpoint, you're following a black line and you're pursuing excellence within the confines of that black line in the four walls of that pool. So to get an athlete in a pool to pay attention is critical because paying attention to the technical aspects and also to the competitive aspects of what we're trying to do, then you're going to move forward. You're going to be better than the average individual that's in the pool.
Hmm.
to tell the truth is so critical because if you don't, then it just becomes a snowball in an item that can be distracting not only to you but to all those you're associated with.
Hmm.
Because once if the truth is not told, it affects everyone.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then obviously the best way to honor your team is with the effort that you put in.
Hmm.
And so, John, I know that my athletes were they were probably going to go and party on the weekends and they were going to
Hmm.
do various things. They're college students. You expected that between the ages of 18 and 22. You hoped
Hmm.
that with each year they became less and less of a distraction. But the fact of the matter is that they're college kids.
Hmm.
And so I expected things that might happen, but you don't break the show up, pay attention, tell the truth, and honor your team with your effort. Those will always be your hold accountable to be a part of this program.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I love it. It's so important for a number of reasons. Number one, the little bit that I know you and have watched you work, these are your values. These are the most authentic things to you. I would imagine this is what your household was like with your kids growing up as well. Like, some version of these same four things, right? Give your best effort for the family, be honest, be focused and show up. Like, so you can coach to this every year, because this is what drives you. It's what fills your tank every day to show up and do it yourself. Correct?
Yes, and I think all programs need to come up with whatever standards they feel like the values and standards are that they can operate within. So the mistake I see coaches make is they'll put down a page of conduct and responsibility, and that becomes a little bit diluted and overwhelming sometimes for the people that they're for the athletes that they're working with.
Hmm.
And the reason I thought four simple things is because I enjoyed talking to my team at least once a week. We'd take time out just to talk about what's going on in the world, what's going on at school. We'd even talk about, hey, the football team lost last night. How many of you went? What did you see? What would you have done differently? And know that, hey, it's important that you support football for several reasons. Number one, they're part of us. Number two, they're our financial driver.
Hmm.
Number three, you see these players all the time. What can you do maybe to make a difference? I mean, whatever the circumstances we discussed were about real life. And so I think coaches today need to make sure that they're talking to their team and they can always remind them what the four principles, the four values, or five or three or whatever they come up with. But the more you communicate, the more you trust, because they see a human side of you as the
Hmm.
coach. It's not that you're putting yourself in a position where you become best friends. That's not what I'm suggesting.
Hmm.
It's you put yourself in a position where they know that the person that's leading um, is realistic, is human, understands the concepts of maybe what they're going through, and probably more importantly, connects with them outside of the field of play.
Hmm. Well, what I love about this as well is like these are standards, not rules. We all know that when we make rules for teenagers, they'll be broken. But these are the standards. These are things that you aspire to do or aspire to be. And it gives you the flexibility as a coach as well to look at the human being in front of you who didn't meet the standard and decide, well, what's appropriate in this case? Because if you have a kid whose parents just got divorced and dad has cancer and whatever, they're not going to be there or come from a broken family or whatever. And it gives you that flexibility to deal with them without this like hard, fast rule of, well, you did this, therefore you're off the team or something like that. And I think that's a really important because, I mean, especially in this day and age, our college, there's so much attention on these college athletes, the cancel culture jumps right in and says, throw this kid off the team, do this, do that. And obviously there's some things that you do that are just of course you can't play anymore. But for most cases, a college football coach has 100 teenage sons. Guaranteed one of them's getting into some sort of trouble every day if you had 100 sons. So it gives you that flexibility to to develop that human being, which is what you promised the parent that you would do when they came to Arizona or came to Ohio State or wherever, correct?
Right. And I think as you go, if you advance in the responsibility of your profession, like I was given the opportunity to represent our country,
Hmm.
I carried that message to our athletes as well. So it was, respect, pride, and unity. So you respect each other, you respect your opponent, you respect the staff and what we're trying to do. And then the pride is you just think you've been given the opportunity to represent your country and what that means to the millions of people that will be watching. And so you want to take the opportunity to know that this flag that you're representing represents the history of our country, the people that have given their lives for that flag, for that piece of cloth, that have given their limbs or know people that have. And then the fact that when you step out onto the deck or the field, it's us against them.
Hmm.
It's the unit, it's what we're unifies us to move forward as a group.
Hmm.
So even at the highest levels, people are people. These are young people that you're dealing with for the most part. And so to give them something that resonates with them and to explain to them why we want to do it, as opposed to you will do this, you will do that. You can see the organizations that are, I think, successful, even at the professional level, when they explain to their athletes and allow them to be part of the process of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. How I have to imagine that this is always a meeting where you sit down with the team and you go over this and this is what it is. How do you get them to buy into this? Do they get to define what it means for this group? Do they get to add something? Is it all you? Because obviously when people weigh in, they're more likely to buy in.
For me, it was to explain the three parts about certainly, respect, pride, and unity,
Hmm.
to give a history lesson, which, what do you say to someone like Michael Phelps when he's on his fifth Olympics that he hasn't heard already?
Hmm.
You try and make sure that you can say something or do something that maybe will resonate with him as well as the person it's their first time and they're just ecstatic. And not that Michael wasn't ecstatic, he was excited to be on all of his Olympics, but trying to figure out a way in which you can connect with everyone is always going to be a bit of a challenge. So it's really important that you think about things that might make a difference. And then when you do get your national team together or when they are together, whether it's at a competition or not, you bring in some people that can can share their experience of what that meant.
Hmm.
And so because I think when you hear someone else's voice, whether it's another athlete or another coach that's been in that position, it can really make a difference. So even if it's at a high school level, even younger, or college, I think coaches can begin to look at their team and think about the things that will make a difference in how they move forward. Because if you can, my philosophy is if you can get people to grow as people,
Hmm.
making them better in athletics is so much easier.
Yeah.
So the more you can open up their peripheral vision, the better chance of success.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that. I want to explore your Olympic time as well, but before I do, this idea of your Arizona value of tell the truth. But all these really, they're two-way concepts, right? As a coach, you can't have this standard for your athletes and not meet them yourself. And when I think about truth, the word truth, right? I think great coaches are truth tellers, and they're great at building a relationship so they can tell the truth. But your athletes have to agree to accept the truth, right? Or at least the coach's version of it. Like, because my job is to tell you why you're not on the relay or why you're not an All-American or whatever. You have to accept that because I'm telling that out of love and care because I want you to be better and I want to help you take you to that place. And I think right now in athletics, because of parents' fear that, oh my God, if my kid gets cut or put on the B team or doesn't make this or doesn't get this award, they're going to miss out. And so they push back against the truth. And I see too many coaches then sort of bending it and being like, well, whatever, I just won't tell them. And I think we're doing a disservice to athletes when we don't tell them the truth. And I just love your thoughts on that.
Anytime you're not truthful, it's going to create problems. And if you're a coach and you shy away from the communication of the truth, it's going to create problems, not only with your athlete, but with the team, but with the parents, with all that are involved. So I think it's one-on-one conversations are the best way and to address it at as quickly as you can. I never, I don't think that you degrade an individual in front of the team unless it's the absolute last straw that you see that might be able to crack the nut, so to speak. I think anytime there's a problem, it's a conversation before, after practice, or in the office, or at some place. Maybe it's off campus, maybe it's at a coffee shop, whatever the circumstances are. But I mean, that was my style, but I know things have changed a little bit in that too many coaches want to meet one on one with an athlete unless there's a third party involved in the conversation.
You just can't
Because
anymore. You have to protect yourself.
exactly. So I know that must be extremely difficult for a coach to be able to have that hard conversation with a third party in the room. But probably with today's coaches, they just assume that's the way it's going to be. And
Hmm.
so, but I think communication trumps everything if it's done in the right way, and trying to prolong that conversation or to avoid it is only going to create the problem of telling the truth and the snowballing effect of what's going to happen. Because once it becomes so big, it's, I'm not so sure, no one's going to win.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And when you tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you said. Like you're just doing it. I mean, I was very lucky. I got that advice early on. Like you have to tell the truth, right? If you're a club coach and you're helping your athletes move on to college, right? You have to tell like this is the level I think you could go play at. And so if I think, if you're a Division III athlete and then you reach out and the coach of Stanford calls me about you, I'm not going to say, oh, yeah, you want that kid, because that's not fair to them. That's not fair to you. And it's also not fair to the next kid comes along who maybe could go to Stanford or could go to an Arizona or whatever. I have to, obviously in swimming, you have times that you can look at, but I might then you're calling a coach about someone's character or their work ethic or their being a great teammate or things like that as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's so important to be a truth teller. I remember I was a very young coach and I was told that I had to go put the son of the governor of the state I was working on the B team. And I had to go talk to the dad with his security detail there. And to be fair to him, he was great and he accepted it. He's like, yeah, I think that's a good spot for him. But I was like 25 and that was a very difficult conversation in that moment.
I could only imagine.
I'd lived in that state for a month, and I'm like, I could be looking for a new job here very soon. So, um, so what about like before we get into the Olympic thing, and I love those three values, people always say to me like, "Oh, John, your books is written for teams. My kid's a swimmer or a tennis player. They're individual athletes, so this doesn't apply." But I know you believe how important team values and team behavior is, even when you might be competing as an individual. So can you just kind of expand upon that for a little bit?
I think anytime you're a part of a team. Now there are some individuals that are really never part of a team from the get-go. A parent, a coach, or someone says, I think if we avoid the high school team because I don't feel like they're going to be coached the right way there, or we turn pro before, or we turn pro at an early age before college, whatever the circumstances. Those are different, obviously, because in those sports, the parents, the coach, and whoever else is involved in the decision,
Hmm.
they feel like it's the way to move forward.
Hmm.
And so I can see where they wouldn't understand the concept of being part of a team. That being said, the majority of kids come through high school where they're part of high school tennis team, high school golf team, high school swim team, whatever might be considered an individual sport. And when you begin to see that your performance or you as an individual has an effect on a greater number, then you begin to learn the lesson of it's not just about me, it's about the whole group.
Hmm.
So that to me is critical. And the same goes for a classroom. When a kid has a hard time within a classroom, for whatever reasons, it could be physical, psychological, or whatever, I mean, that affects the entire class.
Hmm.
So you try and deal with an individual to open up their mind and their vision to see that they're a part of something that's larger than them. And you try and do that with the parents as well. So being a part of something that's bigger than you gives you a sense of, I don't want to say necessarily a sense of security, but it does give you a different motivation and it does give you a little bit different outlook as to what your purpose is. And so I think the people, when you look at great teams and great individuals that are part of a team, I think they understand that concept and generally speaking, buy into it.
Hmm.
So you as an individual, no matter what sport you're coaching individuals to be part of something that's bigger than them. And you preach that and teach that. And that becomes a pride factor where you begin to do what I said was number four was honor your team with your effort.
Hmm.
And that becomes a sense of pride and it becomes a motivational factor that maybe you never thought about before.
Hmm. Well, I mean, when I talk to swim parents or something, they say, "Oh, the team doesn't matter." I'm like, "Really?" Like, I think the team matters a ton because right. What's the level of focus and preparation and being on time and then support of each other in the locker room versus bullying or things like that? I mean, people, these people who their kid quit swimming, it's usually because of bad team dynamics and what happens out of the pool, not what happens in the pool. And so, like you said, when everyone shows up and gives their best effort for the group, it's much easier to give my best effort when I'm having a bad day. But if I don't have that standard and it's like, oh, John's having a bad day, so we'll just let it slide, well then, well then I can let it slide. And that's I think the hard thing to manage. Yes, you might be competing in that race as an individual, but everything that gets you to race day to perform your best has a lot to do with the team around you.
Without question. And I'm gonna I'm gonna expand your thought on good days, bad days when it comes to the individual. When you think about the biggest step you can take forward in competition is when some coaches they say, well, we won ugly today.
Hmm.
And I think that when you're in the training portion, when you're in practice, when kids are not having their best day, it's those that can figure out how to make the best out of the worst are the
Hmm.
ones that always take the step forward. And that means that parents, this is a great lesson for parents to be able to see that there are going to be times when their kids come home and they don't even want to talk about what went on at the game or at practice or whatever. And and they need to realize that that's not a time to talk about it
Yeah.
or to make sure that the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, I really enjoyed watching you play today.
Hmm.
And you certainly talked about this in Mexico City. The first thing that should come out of their mouths is, I really enjoyed watching you play today.
Hmm.
It may not have been the best day or the best game you've ever had, but I sure enjoyed watching you play. And
Hmm.
so that way, at least it takes the edge off of what went on. And coaches need to learn that as well when their team underperforms or makes mistakes that they've gone over many, many times. That okay, for some reason, they didn't get it today. Whatever point I was trying to get across in practice this week about this particular thing, it didn't come across. And
Hmm.
why didn't it come across? It's on me because it didn't come across. It's
Hmm.
not on the team.
Hmm. Yeah. Switching gears to your Olympic years, and especially as national team director for 2012 and 2016, I mean, that is managing a team because you have all the swimmers, right? And then they have their own coaches, and then all the support staff and everything. I mean, that's team right there because if someone's on their own agenda, um, it can just blow the thing up or put undue attention on the wrong things, correct? So talk about those years because obviously you mentioned Michael Phelps before, the greatest swimmer we've ever seen. Um, how do and then you probably, as Michael Phelps is in his fourth Olympics, and then you have a 17-year-old in the room going, this is the guy I've looked up to my whole life, and now I'm in the same room as him. How do you manage all that?
You try and treat everyone the same.
Yeah.
Um, you obviously someone that's had more experience. This is their multiple Olympic or their multiple world championships or whatever it is. They're very different than a rookie.
Hmm.
So, but I think again, you as the person that's trying to unite that group, you try and figure out what it is that's going to unite that group, and whether it's whether it's respect, pride, unity, whatever you use, you try and make sure that everyone, as a coach, picture picture your entire team is out is out in a pasture. You're going to have some that are always on the fence line, and you're going to have those that are always in the middle. And that's you don't want clones. You want everyone's personality to shine, whatever
Hmm.
they have to offer. All you do is ask that whatever you do, don't use the fence line as a place where it's going to disrupt what we're trying to accomplish. So I want your personality. I want your competitiveness to show, but it's got to show within the context of a group. And
Hmm.
so you try and manage that your best. And I think once you begin to see that that works, or you see that they're gravitating more toward the center as opposed to being the outlier, then you know that you've got things going in the right direction. So as I said before, I want I want John O'Sullivan to be John O'Sullivan. I
Hmm.
want he's worked hard to get himself to this position. Now, what can I do to make sure that John's energy is part of this whole process that we're trying to do to unite this group to make it the best group ever. So the energy level is always where we want it to be, and there's no distractions.
Hmm.
So that's the most difficult part about coaching is to, you've got to accept people for who they are, but at the same time, you want to you want to make sure that you provide them the individuality to be themselves, but at the same time be a part of a group. So whatever you do and whatever athletes you come across or administrators or anything, that's what you want to focus your time and effort on. So for
Hmm.
me, it was embracing the group, trying to influence them in ways in which they could see the bigger picture.
Hmm.
And whether that was with anything I could say or staff or any coaches on the staff or bringing in outside people, it was always trying to not enforce, but to encourage those people to be a part of that and to see that is what was going to be the energy that could really drive the machine.
Yeah. And I love, how you did that, which was sort of teach them about the history of what they're a part of. And, to use the metaphor, like this is your time in the sun. Your job is to leave the shirt in a better place, right? Not to embarrass it, not to whatever. It's like there's so many have come before you and what this all stands for. And it's an honor to represent that. So, you know, take it and run with it and whatever, because the sun's only going to shine upon you for so long. Yeah, it's a pretty powerful thing. Do you have a favorite Olympic moment or thing that, listeners might want to hear a story that, we see that, let's call it the NBC edited version of championships, but we all know what goes on behind the scenes to get there.
I think, oh gosh, there were a lot of special there were a lot of special moments. I had special moments as a coach on the Olympic staff, but I also had special moments as the national team director. Um, the the pride of watching people do things, even at the highest level,
Yeah.
watching them do things that maybe they never thought they could do, or as we would say, surprise the world with what you can do. Th- those were those were amazing moments, and without calling one individual out, because I would never want to hurt the
Hmm.
feelings of anyone and not let them have their day in the sun because they all earned it.
Hmm.
It was just watching, particularly watching relays
Mm.
do things that when you watch four people represent the country, I don't care if it was Michael or Katie or Missy or any of these amazing individuals. I could go on and on and on. When they were chosen to be part of a relay and they accomplished something that maybe they didn't know if they could or not,
Hmm.
that was really that was the unity factor that you can't that money can't buy. And
Mm.
so for me to watch someone that wasn't necessarily a big name person earn their way onto a relay and perform, those were incredible moments.
Mm. Yeah, I mean it must be. And then when the national anthem plays, and it just, I can't imagine that gets old. You know, you know.
Yeah, all you have to do is just watch the expression. I mean, kind of going back to what we talked about, no matter what country you represent. In our particular case, forget politics. That has nothing to do with it. What I'm holding in front of you is a piece of cloth.
Hmm.
It's the American flag, but
Hmm.
I want you to think what this piece of cloth represents.
Hmm.
All the history that we've gone through and everything else, and all the people that have fought for this country in one way, shape, or form, whether it was in a battle or whether it was in something that was the rights of people.
Hmm.
you think about that because that's who you are, that's where you live, and those are the millions of people that are going to be watching you. So
Mhm.
if I would encourage you to put your hand over your heart because that represents your pride. And if you're too emotional to sing the national anthem, I get it. Don't worry about it. So to me, it was never an issue with any kids showing respect when they were on, if they were fortunate enough to be on the podium. And
Mhm.
so I think that can go back to every club program that in every coach's mind, letting those young people know that this is really cool. This is
Mhm.
you're on this team. You made the team, and now let's do something with this team.
Mhm.
Even if we don't win every game, let's make sure that our effort is always there, and that's what we're known for. We're known for how hard we try for the 60 minutes or whatever it is that we participate.
Mhm. And it's hard because I mean, I think again, when you're part of something like USA Swimming and you were part of it for these four Olympics where almost winning became expected, right? And you guys were so successful. And sometimes you lose sight of like how hard it is to get there, right? And I think in this last Olympics when they talked about, oh, it just wasn't that much of a success for the US. Well, no, that was sort of like a return to the norm versus this exceptional period that you can't win 30 medals every Olympics. Like there's plenty of other countries and plenty of other wonderful swimmers out there doing great things. So, man, I mean, I could have so many more questions, but we're getting close to the end here. Just how, you and I talked a lot in Mexico about how important it was to develop the athlete and the human being as well. Because let's face it, in swimming, outside of maybe the Katie Ledeckis or the Michael Phelps, they might win Olympic gold and then they need to go get a job. Like, this is not NFL money or NBA money that's going to change your life for generations. So, how do you balance that and attach what you're doing into pool as just a microcosm of these skills are going to help you for the rest of your life?
Well, I think I'm going to go back um, to kind of my early coaching life, and that I carried it through. And that was if I can get you to grow as a person, then there are going to be less obstacles in your way to perform at
Mhm.
your best. So, for instance, if in so if I can share with you life experiences and I can share with you athletic experiences and things like that, you'll begin to maybe have a better perspective on how you go about it. So if, I think I told you in Mexico, if I have a bottle of water and and that's my energy from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, and I'm splashing some of that water out of that bottle based on some drama, relationship, what's going on someplace else or whatever. By the time I stand that bottle back up, maybe a third of it's gone. A third of it is wasted energy. And so if I can get you to begin to see how you can solve some of your own problems, you become a better problem solver, which means there's less drama in your life, there's less drama in the team, and you begin to as you become a better problem solver, things look differently in your life.
Mhm.
So then when you take that back to Olympic athletes or college athletes at some point in time when their career is over, yes, they are going to be in front of an employer and they're going to be looking for a job. And at whatever time in their life, and there's a lot of questions that happen with professional swimmers. They graduate when they're 22 years old, roughly, and maybe they're one or two out of 60 athletes that continue in their sport.
Mhm.
So the rest of the 22 either go on to professional school or they go out into the working world.
Mhm.
So each year, as you progress as a professional athlete, you're hoping to make enough money to stay alive in the sport, but you're looking back and thinking, okay, with every year I do this, I'm missing a year of work, of
Hmm.
real work experience.
Hmm.
So what am I going to do when I'm 28 or 29, when I've gotten 6 or 7 years behind the people that I graduated with in regards to real life, so to speak? So I would always tell them this. So John, you when you're in front of an employer and there's 50 other people in the room applying for the same job or submitted their resumes, you can look that employer in the eye and say, Mr. So and so, I'm not sure I know a whole lot about your company,
Hmm.
but I can guarantee you this. I will outwork every single person that's applying for this job because that's what I've done my entire life, my
Hmm.
entire athletic life. I'll outwork them. And
Hmm.
as an employer, when that employee or that young person in front of me says something like that, game over. I want you.
Yeah.
I'll teach you about my company. I will
Right.
teach you how to do things because I know that you will be a hard worker and someone that understands the concept. So there are so many things as a coach that we can teach about eliminating drama in their life by by working through various things that really don't mean anything, that you don't need to waste any energy on. And also, when you do finally get to that point in your life when it becomes, I need this job, you always have the ace. You can always
Yeah.
pull the ace out and say, I can do this, I'll outwork them.
Yeah. And I think as a coach, on the opposite side of that, when someone's not meeting the standard, when they're not working, when they're causing drama, you could say the same thing. You know what? In 7 years, when you're stand in front of an employer and he asks you why should he hire you and not 50 others, are you going to be able to say, because I can outwork everyone here, because I don't cause drama, because I know how to work with other people? Because that's not what I'm seeing right now. So it's nice. Man, Frank, what an amazing conversation. Any final thoughts, to leave the coaches and parents, people that we're talking here today? Any final thoughts you want to leave them with?
John, first of all, thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed listening to you, and I've also enjoyed hearing your comments because I think anything that we talk about has to do with young people and their life. The only thing I would say to coaches is try and make sure that you put yourself in a position where you feel like you can communicate with not only your athletes but also parents.
Hmm.
Don't shy away from the things that will mean the most down the road because I understand there's a lot of pressure on you. Sometimes it's not much fun, but if you address it at the beginning, it will save you so much heartache in the end. And then I would say to the parents, make sure that what you're doing with your kids is fun. Fun first, accomplishment second. Because if they're having fun, it's just like if you take the drama out. If they're having fun, they're going to want to continue to go to practice and get better. So to me, that's the fuel for the engine is to allow them to do it because they want to do it and they're enjoying doing it. Because anything that you enjoy, you're going to want to do again. Anything that's not fun, you're not going to want to do again. You don't want to go back to practice if you're not having fun. You don't want to continue work at something if you're not having fun. So parents that are into the W more than anything else, you, you're putting up you're making it so much more difficult for your kids to accomplish what you hope they will accomplish.
Hmm. Excellent. Phenomenal final words. Frank, thank you so much for being on the Way of Champions. It's a real honor to have you on.
John, thank you very much. Best of luck to you, and thank you for what you're doing for young people and young coaches.
Thank you so much to Frank Busch. What a wonderful conversation. So much gold there about his values at Arizona and then his values for an Olympic team director and coach. Um, and just love this sort of final thought, right? And this idea of telling the truth and don't shy away from the things that will mean the most down the road. As a coach, as a parent, I mean, this is the best advice I think we can get right there. So thank you, Frank Busch. Thank you to all of you who listen to this podcast and do so much stuff to help share it and promote it. We totally appreciate that. If you can share this with one or two people, it just helps us get the word out and make a bigger difference. Um, Thank you to our Patreon podcast champions. We appreciate all of you so very much who make a monthly donation or an annual donation to help Jerry and I put this out. We have another continuing Patreon champion, Julie Hart. Julie, thank you so much for your support of our podcast. We truly appreciate that. If you want to become a supporter, go to patreon.com/Way of Champions, and you can make that small donation as well. Um, Again, final reminder, Champion Sports Parent is out. Get this for the parents. If you're coaching, if you want a bulk order, just email me, John at changingthegameproject.com, and we'll get that set up for you as well. But in the meantime, remember, your influence is never neutral. These last 2 weeks, we've heard from Roy Williams and now Frank Busch, two Hall of Fame coaches at the top of their sport, telling you how they use their influence. So hopefully you can go out and use yours for good this week. And we'll see you again next week, everyone.